Hello everyone, and to Grappling with Canada. As usual, I'm your host, the Taxman, and I'm very excited to be bringing today's episode to everyone today. But before we get into all of that and the fantastic guests that I have to provide, shall we say, unique insight onto today's subject matter, I just want to touch on briefly the tremendous feedback that we got from last month's episode covering Canada's greatest athlete, Gene Kiniski. Thanks very much to everybody for the very kind words on that episode. We're going to be talking a little bit later in the program about some of the reviews that we got regarding that episode. But more importantly than that, that episode smashed every single download, listen, view, whatever metric you want to use on whatever platform you're using. That episode blew everything out of the water. So thank you very much, everybody, for checking it out and for passing it along to other people. Because really, without you guys passing it along to other people, then this program really doesn't go anywhere. Although it is a tremendous look at the history of professional wrestling in Canada and the people who made it what it was. The reality is, without you guys helping spread the word, it would fall on deaf ears. So thank you very much, everybody, for passing the program along. If this is your first time tuning into the program, I would highly suggest that you go back in the archives. We have tremendous episodes on, like I said, the aforementioned Gene Kiniski, Canada's greatest athlete. We've also covered Gail Kim, Dino Bravo, and Stu Hart and Stampede Wrestling. So those are in the archives, and they are tremendous listens. So I'd highly suggest to you, if this is your first time with the program, obviously don't jump off this one and go to those ones, but feel free after this program to go back and listen to the previous episodes in the archives. Speaking of what's going on with this program, I'm very happy to announce that we finally have a Facebook presence and Instagram as well. So on Facebook, I would highly invite everybody to come check us out. Grappling with Canada, there's a Facebook group and page, very easy to find. Just search with your little Facebook search bar, Grappling with Canada. As well, on Instagram, you can also find us at Grappling with Canada as well. As usual, you can always find us on Twitter as well, at 6_podcast. That's the outlier. And then once again, as usual, on YouTube, youtube.com/c/six-sided podcast. And we'll be going over all of that at the end of the show as well. But I wanted to get those in early, just because those are brand new. So I would really highly suggest, twist your arm, if you will, to everybody go join that Facebook group. I would love to have some discussions about this episode in particular, but also your thoughts, ideas, suggestions about episodes that we previously done. And as well, if you're going to leave reviews on that, hopefully they're the 5-star variety. But if you leave reviews on there, I'm going to actually start reading reviews on the ends of these programs. So if you leave a review, you know it's going to get some airtime. So once again, Facebook, Instagram, just search wonderfully Grappling with Canada. Will come up, and come join the conversation, and let's have a lot of fun with it. As well, I will also mention that we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Grappling with Canada. For as low as $3 a month, you can help support the show. You get this show early, and as well, you get a shout out for being a patron, or a patron, if you will. So once again, patreon.com/Grappling with Canada. $3 a month is gets you in the door, if you will. So go ahead and check that out. But more importantly, on to today's subject matter. Now, today is going to be on really wrestling legend, not even just Canadian wrestling legend, because he made such an international name for himself as well, Billy Two Rivers. Now, in this episode, I was so fortunate to actually be able to have a conversation with Billy Two Rivers that you're going to be able to hear later on in this program. I also have a wrestling historian and the individual behind SlamWrestling.net, Greg Oliver. I had a tremendous conversation with him leading into my conversation with Billy Two Rivers. And I just want to say as well, this interview with Billy Two Rivers would not have happened if not for Tom Fenario. You're going to hear a little excerpt from him in a couple of minutes. But really, I reached out to him, and he reached out to Billy Two Rivers' daughter, and she gave the okay, and so did he. And Tom's the one who put me in contact. So Tom Fenario, if you're listening, thank you very much, and I owe you a big debt of gratitude for really getting this program off the floor. So once again, Tom Fenario from APTN, I can't say enough good things about him. Speaking of people I can't say enough good things about, in the interview that you're going to hear later with Billy Two Rivers, I'm almost speechless to really go into detail about it. And you're going to hear in the audio with him, I really just kind of lay out for most of the program, because what in the world would I be able to offer, say, or reiterate that he doesn't do a good job of doing himself? The man is truly inspiring. We talked, the first time I talked with him, I was very, very nervous, and he actually had me slow down about a 33 1/3 because I was just so excited and just couldn't contain myself. So he had a good laugh at my expense, but he was such a tremendous person to talk to. And truly, it's an interview that personally I've listened to it several times, not just editing, but just sitting in awe again of just the conversation that we were able to have. We spent almost 2 hours on the phone. He was so gracious with his time, and I was in awe. So I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but when you hear the portion of the program where we are having our conversation, you're not going to be hearing a whole lot of me, and there's for very good reason that is the case, and it's because I was just in awe, and I just wanted to sit back and absorb as much information and knowledge as I possibly could. So I'm deeply humbled and deeply honored that I was able to have that conversation with him, and obviously deeply honored to be sharing that conversation with all of you today. Now, there are a few things that I need to get into before we get any further into this episode, and that is in regards to Canada's history with Indigenous people. Now, Canada is a fantastic country to live in. I love living here. My family has lived here for 3 generations now. My kids are obviously going to live here as well. That being said, as great of a country as Canada is, we have a very checkered, and actually, unfortunately, continue to have a very checkered past and present with our First Nations people. The way that our population and government treats and deals with them in often cases is still abhorrent, even in the year 2021. It's really a sad state of affairs, and things have gotten better over my 35 years on this earth. However, they are in no way, means, shape, or form where they need to be. And there's a lot of subject matter that he goes into that I am simply not qualified to speak about, because the reality is I'm just a white dude from Winnipeg. And there's a lot of personal opinions that I have about how our First Nations people have been treated throughout the years and continue to be treated. I can't go into all of that right now, but I will say that I would highly suggest that if you, the listener at home, if you're Canadian, if you're not Canadian, it doesn't really matter where you're from. Take the time, do a little bit of research, involve yourself and immerse yourself a little bit in what our First Nations people have gone throughout the years, whether it's been, we'll say, backhanded treaty negotiations that were done in very poor faith, whether it was the residential school system, whether it was the scoop in the 60s, on and on and on. It's still a very large blemish on this country that I would hope to God, by the time I'm elderly, we'll say, but still on this earth, that I can actually see some very meaningful and very deserved progress being made towards the treatment of our First Nations people. So I apologize a little bit, everyone. I don't want to start this program on a downer, but there's no way that I could do this program and not talk about an issue like that. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. Once again, do some reading, do your research, talk to somebody who knows. And there's a lot of people out there that know a lot more than me. like I said, I'm just one guy trying to do the right thing, and if this program can at least facilitate a little bit of that, then I believe it's done its job. So once again, we are going to get into the crux of this program. Before we get into it, I'm going to be playing an interview conducted by the aforementioned Tom Fenario with Billy Two Rivers. Now, this was done in 2017 for the APTN, so you're going to hear a little teaser trailer, if you will, about some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about with Billy Two Rivers himself, as well as with Greg Oliver. But I'm going to play this audio, and on the other side, we are going to jump right in the program. Please enjoy.
Over here, this is one of the outfits that I wore when I was wrestling.
The name Billy Two Rivers is famous the world over, mainly for longtime wrestling fans who remember his 24 years in the ring. So you never played a bad guy?
No. Okay. I didn't have a choice. They loved me.
Yeah. No. Two Rivers made his debut in 1953 after being trained by fellow Mohawk wrestler Don Eagle. He combined a fierce wrestling style with colorful regalia to travel the world. The United Kingdom, Japan, the United States all came out to cheer him on. Well, most of them. Right before a match in Hanover, Germany, a spectator criticized Two Rivers for wearing an inauthentic, pan-indigenous outfit. Two Rivers went on to explain that even though he's Mohawk, he was proud to wear boots made by the Huron-Wendat and a headdress gifted to him by the Blood Tribe in Alberta.
He said, what is this? He says, you're not, he says, you're not Indian, what are you? I said, yeah, I'm Indian. I'm a native North American Indian. He says, well, what do you dress like this for? I says, because I'm an ambassador and I represent the people all across the country.
But being an ambassador wasn't enough to make him feel safe when it came to wrestling in places like Belfast during the late 60s.
At night, the soldiers would come out with dark faces. They'd stand in a corner not to be seen, waiting for the rebels or something. And the greatest concern I had is that they're going to put a bomb underneath the ring or something, you know.
That wouldn't be the last time in his life Two Rivers would end up in a militarized zone.
Got a call about 5:30, 6, almost 6 o'clock, and it was Joe, and he says, Billy, he says, the bridge is blocked. I said, what? He says, yeah, he says, the Mercier Bridge is blocked.
After ending his wrestling career in the mid-70s, Two Rivers became a council chief for the Mohawk Council of Ganawage. He was among the leadership group charged with brokering peace after Ganawage barricaded the Mercier Bridge in support of Ganasatake during the Yoka crisis. And despite having traveled the world over, the summer of '90 was witness to the worst act of racism he ever saw, right next door to his own community in Montreal. In what's become known as the Roxit Whiskey Trench Incident, a convoy of Mohawk women, children, and elders leaving Ganawage were stoned in their cars.
The fellows going around to the different businesses that were there, I says, come on out and let's stop these Indians, these people. They didn't care.
After 20 years on council, Two Rivers retired in 1998. Since then, he's done acting in films and shows like Mohawk Girls, had a photo of himself used on the cover of a Van Morrison album, first without his permission before they settled out of court, and served as an elder for the Assembly of First Nations. But most of all, Two Rivers is proud of his 9 grandchildren, many of whom speak Kanien'kehá:ka, the Mohawk language, with him. It also appears that they have inherited his athleticism.
I just want to point out to you, I have a picture on there from a number of pictures where my granddaughter won her championship for Greater Montreal, I believe.
To say that Two Rivers has lived a rich life is to state the obvious, and to assume that he doesn't have at least a few more chapters would likely be a mistake.
I don't know how much longer I'll be in this world over here. I'm trying to pass everything that I know on to the next generation's job.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Ganawage, Mohawk Territory.
Billy Two Rivers was born May 5th, 1935. He is a Mohawk retired professional wrestler. He began wrestling professionally in 1953 and competed until 1977. During his career, he wrestled in the United States, United Kingdom, Japan, and naturally in Canada, as well as many other countries like Germany and others. After retiring from wrestling, he became a leader of the Mohawk Nation on the Kanawake Reservation. He played a major role in the blockade of the Mercier Bridge during the 1990 Oka Crisis, which you're going to hear a little bit later about. He's also appeared in multiple movies. Now, to go into a little bit deeper detail into the career of Billy Two Rivers, I'm very happy to be joined on the program by his wrestling historian and the man behind SlamWrestling.net, Greg Oliver. So I'm going to throw it to my conversation right now with Greg Oliver. All right, very happy to be joined on the program this afternoon by historian Greg Oliver. Greg, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show, Andy.
No problem. Just before we get into our obviously main subject matter today, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, assuming that they may not be as familiar with you as I am.
Well, there's a good setup. Long story short, I was like a 14-year-old kid, got into pro wrestling with Hulkamania running wild all over me. I started a newsletter, and my passion sort of grew from there. I quickly realized there was a lot more to what's out there in pro wrestling than the WWE, and it grew and it grew. And then my time at the Toronto Sun coincided with the growth of the internet and the debut of the internet, and which also coincided, of course, with probably the second really big national wrestling boom, what we sort of just before the Attitude Era. And so all of a sudden I was drawn back into the world of wrestling again, and we started the Slam Wrestling website. It was going by the end of 1996, and so I can really say I've been writing about wrestling for 35 years, which is insane.
And speaking of Slam Wrestling, I actually just read your article last night about the Stone Cold Steve Austin special that was on A&E Biography, and I thought you hit the nail on the head on that one. A little bit lacking for people who are getting into the history of wrestling and the history of Stone Cold, so a little bit disappointing there, but I did enjoy your recap on that show.
Thank you. I mean, it was what I expected, I guess, but you hold out hope when it's a big company like A&E that prides itself on doing such good work, that they delivered something that was well done. I'm not saying it wasn't well done, but it certainly didn't challenge anyone and bring out anything new. And there were lots of opportunities there to tell some new Stone Cold stories, but they were the same old, same old.
Now, outside of, obviously, your work with Slam Wrestling, you've authored and been in the process and production of multiple wrestling history books. Can you go into a little bit of detail about some of those projects?
Well, it's even more than that. I guess I've been involved with publishing now for a long time. My first book came out in 2003, the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Canadians. Then I teamed up with Steve Johnson as my tag team partner, and we did the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the tag teams. And then we did the heels. There was a book on Chris Benoit in there. We did Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Storytellers, which came out in 2019. I did 7 different hockey books, biographies, an autobiography, some historical books. It's just been a wild ride. I've also laid out probably 40 books.
Wow.
Edited a few books for ECW Press. Self-published my own book, two kids' books, and then I self-published the Billy Van story. It's called Who's the Man, Billy Van, who was an actor. And so it's been a fun, wild ride, and it's been very fortunate that it coincides very nicely with the growth of my son, who is 14 now, so I was the stay-at-home dad. It's really crazy to think I got so much done over all those years, but people think it's a lot of work to write, and it is, but it's something that you can chip away at as opposed to dive in sort of whole hog.
Yeah, talking to some of the other authors that we've had on the program, they say the same thing. It's, yes, you write a book, but it's the process, and it's, months or years of, chipping away, and maybe you write some now, and you hit a block, and then all of a sudden you're writing a ton because you get that flood of information or that revelation or whatever. It to me, it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, you know, you may be... Well, the Storyteller's book that Steve Johnson and I did is a perfect example. Like, a lot of them were threads that were left over from working on the Heels or the Heroes and Icons book or whatever it is, right? They're little things you never really tackled. Like the whole story of Tuffy Truesdale, the guy who wrestled the alligator. So, you know, it's like we really need to do a story on that. How do we work that into a book? So that eventually led to Storytellers, and it was... You know, and that's great. I mean, I'm glad we got to tell his story. Things don't always work out the way you want, though, right? I found his son, and we talked briefly. He was all excited about talking, and then I never got a hold of him again. He never returned calls.
Wow.
So you just don't know sometimes what's going to happen, whether someone's going to be around, whether someone's going to be open to talking. And then sometimes they surprise you, right? Everybody said that Don Jardine, the spoiler, was going to be, you know, really tough to interview. He never really did many interviews, and I talked to him, and great big long interview, and, you know, not long that after he passed away. It was almost like it was his exit interview, and he knew that. But he didn't tell me that. So, yeah, you just don't know what's going to happen. And that's part of the fun of this business and writing, and you may find a rabbit hole and start going down it and come up 3 days later realizing, man, I got a lot of stuff on this guy nobody's ever heard of.
So speaking of down the rabbit hole a little bit, what was your first kind of introduction to Billy Two Rivers? And as a side to that, I know you had written an article, listen to me talk, almost 15 or 20 years ago in regards to him, and I think you interviewed him at that time, but kind of what cued you on to Billy Two Rivers, and what led you down the hole of kind of seeing what he was about, what his career was about?
If I'm remembering correctly, and again, we're talking, 20 years ago, it's just a name that comes up a number of times, and we took a lot of pride in the Canadian Hall of Fame that we had on Slam Wrestling, because we were part of Canoe.ca and this whole Sun Media empire. And so I was trying to find all the different Canadians to talk to. One of the guys I really wanted to write about was Don Eagle, who was a Canadian champion, like a world champion in 1950. And you can't really tell the story of Don Eagle without talking about Billy Two Rivers as well. So that led me to talking to people like Don Leo Jonathan about Don Eagle and talking to Billy Two Rivers himself. And then once you start talking to Billy, he likes to talk. He's not a braggart at all, but he also will firmly put you in your place and explain to you what he did and what it meant. And so from that perspective, I think he was really refreshing compared to a lot of wrestlers who like to, how are we going to put it, really promote themselves and really put themselves over. Billy wasn't really like that. And it was the politician in him. That also fascinated me, how much he spent in politics and how important that was to him to represent his people, and especially on the national scale when you get to the Oka crisis. So he was definitely a really fascinating interview, and got to meet him a few times at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York. He came to Toronto for one of my Titans in Toronto dinners. He's just an all-around good guy.
I know we're jumping ahead in the program a little bit, but I echo your sentiments 100%. I started reading or researching him as the wrestler, but then you read all the political background and all the machinations of his career after wrestling. It's incredible, and I found for myself, the more I read, the more I was just inundated with this awe of what this man has actually accomplished in life. Like, yes, wrestling is a big deal for wrestling fans, but the political career that he has and how he's really shaped Indigenous affairs in this country, I think that's the big picture, and that's, to me, what's so impressive about him and what he actually brings to the history of Canada, and then obviously the history of Canadian wrestling as well.
Absolutely, and coincidentally on Slam, we're about to run an article about politicians from that, wrestlers that turn into politicians, and there's no one that compares to Billy Two Rivers except for a guy named Tom Drake, who was also a lifetime politician down in Alabama. So those are people who took wrestling and made a lifetime out of it. Not like your Jesse Ventura, who's obviously the biggest name, but he was the state governor for only a little while, whereas Billy did this his whole life. Like, this is just what flows through him, and I'm glad it's being recognized. And he probably needs to be recognized even more than he is.
So in terms of his wrestling career, and obviously we're not going to go paint by numbers because I don't think that that's a fair way to do it, and there's no way that you would ever be able to go through a career like his and do it justice that way. But when you were kind of researching his career and looking back on what he was doing in that real early 50s into the 60s, what were some of the things that were jumping out at yourself in terms of what he was doing, what he was able to accomplish at those times, considering where he came from?
Well, the whole history of the Mohawk out of Quebec there, it often ties in so much to New York and the building of the big skyscrapers and stuff like that. So instead he went a different direction, and he traveled all kinds of other places and really shared his culture. And we look back now, it was stereotypical in many ways, but yet it was also who he was. And he wasn't pretending to be First Nations, right? He was. So he was able to conduct himself with some real gravitas, right? And he was able to explain to people where he came from, what the cultures were. He never played the silly cowboy and Indian kind of thing. So I really respected that. Of course, every promoter is going to be different wherever you are. And again, he's not a guy that's going to run down other promoters or difficult times that he had. It's more like, this is my journey, and this is who I am, and this is how I got here. Of course, the biggest thing about Billy, though, was England and how he became such a big star there.
Yes. Yeah, going through my research, yes, he was a star in America, and you can understand why. There's still that fascination then with cowboys and Indians. I know it's a horrible way to say it, but it was still a fascination at then. And, Western spaghettis, if you will, were still very mainstream and very in vogue at that time. So you can understand why there would be such a draw to a character like that in wrestling. And obviously wrestling in the 50s into the 60s was still massive in America, especially the places that he was wrestling. But yeah, to me, it was incredible to read about, like, I can't remember who said it exactly, but there was, Paul LeDuc, who has said multiple times that he was, like Billy T. Rivers he's talking about, was a god in England. And to me, you wouldn't think that somebody like him would translate over there just reading the face of it. But then you start hearing about what a showman he was, and then you actually speak to him. Like, I got to speak with him, and there's no doubt why he would be so over in England and other parts of the world.
Well, that's true, but you also have to take into account that a lot of the U.S. territories were very heavyweight based, and Billy Two Rivers was not a giant guy, so he never really headlined a lot of places in North America as the top draw. But then he got to England, and they generally celebrated smaller wrestlers, and they had ample TV time. So both things worked incredibly well in his favor, and he was able to get out there on TV and standing out compared to the rest of the English white guys. How else do you put it, right? He really stood out, same way Kendo Nagasaki did, because he was so different than the rest of the other British wrestlers at the time. And Billy Two Rivers really was a star in England there.
To put it into context, we're talking about the size of Billy Two Rivers. He is 6'5" and about 205 or 210 when he was wrestling in America, or wrestling in England, sorry.
He wasn't 6'5", that's 6 foot or so.
6 foot, sorry. Yes, you're correct. I apologize.
But yeah, he was on the smaller side.
Smaller size for that era, but he would be on...
But in today's wrestling...
Oh my God, he'd be almost a giant. And that's not a knock on today's talent, but that's just, how far it's come in terms of progression. That's a very poor term to use, but that's where we are in wrestling today.
Well, but back then they were able to have those territories, right? Columbus might be a smaller territory where the smaller guys would succeed. Seattle was a little bit like that. Whereas in Calgary, I mean, Stu Hart liked the big beefy guys, right? The football players. So
yes.
That was a bigger man territory. But then, they bring in Davey Boy and Dynamite, and it becomes a smaller man territory. And they start celebrating all those Japanese guys coming in from, the Kichi Yamadas. But wrestling is supposed to, change and ebb and flow. And it happened in Montreal there, right? Where Billy Two Rivers was a big part of the Grand Prix promotion that the Vachons ran, but that had a limited shelf life. So he was able then to go, do other things.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Grand Prix experiment, if you will, but they were right up against Lutte International.
La Lutte des As.
Yeah.
So the Aces.
Yeah, so, a wrestling war essentially in Montreal, and they just got burnt out. I was talking to Billy about that in terms of our interview as well, and he was saying it was just they brought bigger guys and bigger names and all this talent, and it just kind of fed on itself until it imploded, and he just, like you said, at least he had kind of a backup plan, not a backup plan per se to get out of Grand Prix, but he had that career and that personality and that established run that he could, jump from there and go wherever else he wanted to go at that point in time.
Yeah, and I'm not sure he was hugely driven to be a pro wrestler by the 70s there, right? He enjoyed it. But yeah, he was destined for bigger things. And I'm not sure we all knew that, or he would have known that in the 60s. But by the time the 70s were there, he was ready to settle down a bit. And he found the really good gig, right? Being a politician, helping out with his people on the Gananoque Reserve.
So in terms of that portion of it, and we can move into that now, what was so fascinating to you, or what was the most interesting thing that you were able to uncover when you were looking into the career of Billy Two Rivers that you may not have realized or may not have thought was possible?
Well, I remember when I was doing this story, I was still connected with the Toronto Sun. So I was able to go to the Toronto Sun news archives, the library that existed then at the Sun. It's not around anymore. But I was able to go in there and get clipping files and look at some of the photo files of Billy Two Rivers. And so first off, you've got to be fairly notable to have a clipping file. It means you've been in the newspaper a number of times. And of course that leads to the whole Oka crisis from, was that 1989? And just how he was such a big part of it, that he was front and center in one of these national events where the Mohawk of the Gananoque Reserve stood for what they wanted to against the Canadian government. And he was front and center. So he'd be on TV, he'd be quoted in the newspapers, whatever it was, and he was always well-spoken and respected.
So I'm going to date myself a little bit here. When the Oka crisis happened, I was 5 years old in kindergarten, but I remember it being a big topic when I was in school, and throughout my entire elementary through junior high through high school, every year when we had, whether it was social studies or Canadian history or whatever the program was, there was always a large portion of the program that was dedicated to the Indigenous peoples in Canada and learning about them. And the Oka crisis came up year after year after year after year, every year that I was in school. So I couldn't tell you how many times that I've read about the Oka crisis or written papers on it, because it was recent history. This was a big watershed moment in Canada. And throughout all these papers and all of this knowledge that I had of the Oka crisis, I never did connect Billy Two Rivers and the Oka crisis. I had heard the name, but again, you don't know the backstory. You just know that he's an elder. Okay, makes sense to me, and he's well-spoken, and he, even in his interviews during the Oka crisis and then afterwards, and we're going to be playing some of them later on in the program, he has this sort of magnetism about him. Like he draws you in just in the way that he talks and enunciates and the way he phrases things in certain contexts. You just can't help but be drawn to him. You would understand why he would be so popular in professional wrestling. But to have that kind of aspect of his personality translate essentially seamlessly from wrestling into being an elder chief and a counselor for the Mohawk Nation is, I don't know, I was almost speechless when I put it all together.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. So it was 1990. I was double checking my notes, but how did pro wrestling train him for that? It probably did to a degree, right? You learn these skills talking in front of people. You learn this confidence going to the ring wearing underwear, basically. Yeah. So all these different things add up and helped shape who he became. The trials and tribulations he would have had on the road, no doubt, down in the Carolinas in the 60s. I mean, when he's a person of color. So no doubt there were issues there, too, that helped shape who he was and therefore later what he stood for. And kudos to him.
Again, I know we're jumping around a little bit in terms of timelines, but I wonder how much of what he saw out in England and the way that he was treated out there, and also in Japan and other places, how he was treated there, how that would have, maybe shaped is the wrong word to use, but influenced the way that he dealt with his fellow people when he came back here. Like, to me, it's very hard to have a world view like that and not be bringing a lot of those values or experiences back from you to try and shape what you, him being Billy T. Rivers, are trying to build in terms of your, not necessarily his career, but his community with the nation.
Well, aren't we all that, though? We're all the sum of our experiences. He just had a little bit more colorful experiences than the rest of us, right? He got out there, he performed, he got to deal with fans and promoters and travel the roads. And you're right, they all add up to becoming the man he was, or man that he is, respected and loved. And it's funny because I think about my personal experiences with him at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame and at the Titans in Toronto. In both cases, he was asked to, give sort of a blessing to the, beginning of the banquet. And he had the big headdress and spoke native tongue and all that kind of stuff. And it was just one of those moments that was really magical and stands out. But then to actually sit and talk with him, he's got like a little twinkle in his eye. He will give you a little wink. And but he was a big guy then. So those are fond memories. They're just kind of flooding back as we're talking here, Andy.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to get too much into my conversation with him that everyone's going to hear later on in this program, but I have to say the same thing, right? The more he speaks, the more it really affects you, the listener, because he does go from topic to, and not boastfully like you would say, or like you had said. He's matter of fact about it in terms of this is what happened. He's not putting his skew on it, but the way that he presents it is what really got me. And there were times during the course of our interview where I was just, what do you say? I was speechless, because not only was his story incredible, but the way, like I said, that he framed it, it's just, you would think that you're reading a manuscript for a movie, for example. But this was his life, and again, from somebody who came from, humble beginnings, from a reserve just outside of Montreal to being a worldwide sensation, essentially, when you boil it all down, in a sport where people dance around in their underwear, like you said. To me, that speaks more to what he's accomplished than, God, I don't know. Like, and even now, like, I get so hard pressed to find the words to properly describe it, because it's one of those things where I'm still in awe. This was only a few days ago, and I spent my entire weekend just replaying it over and over and over in my mind, and just I don't know what else to say. Just the man, his story, and the chance that I had to speak with him is just something that will last with me forever. I can already say that with all honesty.
But that's partly why we choose to do some of these journalistic attempts, right? To talk to somebody, to learn their story. Sometimes our job really is just to sit there and listen and guide the conversation a little bit. It can be really magical hearing people share their story. And But then some of these guys tell their same stories again and again and again, and they start believing their own hype, and they start telling stories, their own way. And with Billy, it always seemed very matter of fact. That's you said that earlier, and that's exactly it. He's a very matter of fact kind of guy.
I guess that's the biggest draw for me in terms of doing this program. Like, yes, the people that we've covered so far they've been interesting, and I've learned a lot along the way, but this was my first kind of real feel from somebody who, essentially retired 15 years before I was born, right? There's a lot of that life experience that if you don't get it from them, it's lost into translation. We can read about it from authors like yourself and many others who do such a great job of bringing those stories to life. Yes, we can learn about it vicariously through that, but there's just something about hearing the story from the person themselves that lived it and experienced it. It's something that I didn't think that I would be as affected by it as I was, but very clearly I have been. I don't know what else to say in terms of what he meant or now means to me as a person. Now that I've had the chance and opportunity to talk to him, that's kind of my hope with this program, is that other people are able to take something from this, and like if they get the idea, maybe I'll read a little bit more about Billy Two Rivers, and then maybe that spawns them onto someone like Don Eagle, and maybe that spawns them onto somebody else in the history of wrestling that they would have never had the idea or thought or want to learn about previously. If they even get a glimmer of that from this program, then it served its purpose, in my opinion.
That's not any different than what I do, Andy. Is like, you do a story, it may sit out there in the ether, and then it may take a while to come to fruition, right? A recent example is Pistol Pete Marquez died. He was a wrestler out in Los Angeles. Not a big name. Like, he was an undercard kind of guy, filled out the card, helped train a lot of the guys out there in LA. But when he died, his family reached out to me because they had read an obituary I'd done years ago about Pete's best friend, who was Buddha Khan. Okay. So they reached out and said, hey, can you share the news that Dad died? And, of course, I said, sure, let me talk to, I talked to his daughter and his son, and you quickly had a story. And that's a different kind of legacy, right? An obituary. And here we're able to talk with somebody like a Billy Two Rivers while they're still around, which is great. So kudos to doing that, and I'm glad I got a chance to talk to him way back when. Don Eagle, as you mentioned, he's in my book, The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, Heroes and Icons. So and they're both in the Canadians book as well. So there's, you never know when something's going to pay off, right? It could be years later. That's the neat part of this job.
So in terms of, and we'll just go with the broader range of Canadian wrestling history, what have been some of the names that you've researched over the years that have kind of spawned you onto bigger projects that you may not have thought that were going to be down the pipeline?
That's kind of interesting. Or maybe the what ifs are part of it too, right? It's like, I got to talk to George Gordienko, but I didn't interview him, and he didn't want to be interviewed. So we just chatted. Those kind of things are what ifs. It's like, I wish there was more on somebody like him out there, because he was a fascinating character. Other guys, as I alluded to earlier, like you get a guy like Roddy Piper told his story so many times that he believed it, and that his first match was at 16 with Larry Henning in the Winnipeg Arena, which wasn't true at all. And you get the confidence, having done this for so long, that I in Iowa at the Hall of Fame there, and I asked him, Roddy, why do you not acknowledge that you lived in Al Tomko's basement and that Tony Condello trained you? And he just sort of gave me like a death glare. So, part of our job is to try to make sure the history gets told properly. So they had the Stone Cold biography on A&E last night, but then they had the WWF Treasures show on A&E where they went and looked at the old stuff. And honestly, at one point, Triple H said WWE is the keepers of history, like wrestling history. And it's like, no, you're not. You are not. You guys are telling your story. It's not the same thing as the whole story. So that's part of our job as journalists, is to get some more of the story out there, not just the one-sided piece of history.
Just two things I'll touch on briefly. One, he being Roddy Piper may not acknowledge Tony Candello because I think Tony beat him in a boxing match, one of the first road trips they had, if my memory serves me correctly. And the other thing that you mentioned is in terms of WWE being the gatekeepers of history, or however they try and phrase it. Look, the reality is that a lot of the WWE product is sanitized and homogenized and pasteurized, to quote somebody, and it's not the actual history. It's not what's actually happened, or it's presented in a context that is so far removed from the actual goings on of the time. And without people like yourself, and without people like a lot of the other authors that I've had in the program, whether it's Bertrand Hébert or Pat LaPrade or Heath McCoy or whoever, if people aren't actually getting to the real bottom of these stories, if it's not being exposed and brought to light, and I'm not saying that in a negative connotation necessarily, but if people don't understand the real story behind it, then unfortunately you get the Roddy Piper effect, where something's been told again and again and again, and little wrinkles added here time and time again, and then you wind up with somebody like Bruce Pritchard. And we all know what that kind of does to the history of professional wrestling. So if nothing else, I want to say kudos to you for at least going in depth and bringing these stories to life so that people like me have a chance to actually understand and get a feel for the history of professional wrestling.
Thank you. And no historian, no writer does it alone, right? So you mentioned Pat LaPrade and Bertrand Hébert and Heath McCoy, and these are all guys I've worked with, known well, had beers with in some cases, things like that. Like, you don't exist in a bubble. You need these other people doing the research. You need the progression, right? Somebody else shows you this and somebody else shows you that. It's the best. That's teamwork at its finest.
So I guess as we start to wind down this portion of the program, what kind of projects are you working on, and what, without giving too much away, because that's like the be-all end-all of those kinds of conversations, but what do you have coming down the pipeline, and what are you looking forward to in the future?
Oh, those are always tricky questions.
Not to put you on the spot or nothing like that.
Right. Well, the Billy Band book took a lot out of me. It was great, and we're still always promoting that because it's a self-published thing. The book with John Arezzi called Matt Memories just came out, and it was fascinating because it wasn't just about wrestling. I also got to learn about baseball. I also got to learn about country music, especially, and the behind-the-scenes maneuverings there. I always want to learn more. I'm kind of a little bit tired about pro wrestling in some ways, right? I want to learn more about other things. So I do have a project on the go that's a lot like Arezzi's book, but I'm not at liberty to talk about it yet because the contract's not signed. But it's a lot like Arezzi's, a crazy story, multiple lives in different worlds, and really a lot of fun. And I help other people, right? Lefisto's book, I still hope is going to happen, and I've been helping her work on that. She's trying to take a lot more of the reins of it, which is great. She's got such an amazing story, and important part of Canadian wrestling history as well. And you never know where the next project's going to come, right? That's the fact, right? It could be something really neat. It could be a hockey book out of nowhere. It could be a biography completely different. So you got to just always be ready. Even just editing, right? Out of the blue, somebody had read my book, Father Bauer and the Great Experiment, about, Father Bauer, who created the idea of the Canadian national hockey team. And this guy really liked the book and said, I really liked your writing. Will you help edit my book? So now I've got his book to edit. Like, it's not a huge job, but it's an honor to be asked. And, I get a few bucks out of it, but that's life, right? It's a gig economy, and you're stuck at home. It's a global pandemic. So what else am I going to do? Whereas, it's really weird to be working on a subject with a subject that I've never met, but that's the circumstances at the moment, that I can't go down and visit for a little while.
Well, I can say I'm looking forward to your upcoming projects for sure. And if people are looking for how to get in contact with you, give us the personal ways of contact via Twitter or whatever, and then let's hear the website for Slam Wrestling as well.
Sure, yeah. Well, slamwrestling.net is our home, and when we moved on from Post Media, we were an early casualty of the pandemic. We set up on our own, but we retained the rights to all our content, including, for example, my article on Billy Two Rivers, the Don Eagle story. So a lot of it's up there. We haven't rebuilt the Canadian Hall of Fame, but I hope to get that done this summer. So that's that aspect of my life. Oliverbooks.ca is the best place to find me and all my different books. And all my socials are on there. Links to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So that's oliverbooks.ca for my 17 books. It's crazy to say that, but it's true.
And in terms of the books, we'll have a few links on tinyurl.com/Grappling With Canada, direct Amazon links that you guys can use to purchase those books. And I would highly encourage everybody to go to their way and maybe pick something up you wouldn't necessarily think that you'd be interested in. Because I find that like a lot of the times that's a way to get hooked onto the next thing, right? Maybe you don't think that you're going to be interested in a hockey book, for example. Or maybe, you're looking for a wrestling book. I'll pick this one up as well. And that kind of leads you down the rabbit hole. So that's something that I would encourage people to do.
And I love the overlaps sometimes that are unexpected, right? The number of times I've talked to these hockey guys and you find out they're big wrestling fans. And I'm sure, so one example would be Hockey Hall of Famer Pierre Pilote. And I helped edit his book. And so, we got to go visit his house. And I can remember my son out in his backyard. He was teaching him how to pitch and putt with the little golf thing he had set up in the backyard. But then Pierre later told me he was a huge wrestling fan growing up. He grew up in right on the border between Quebec and Ontario. And so he would have seen guys like Billy Two Rivers and watched them wrestle and watched them grow. And I just love that, right? You never know where the wrestling fan is. Whereas the hockey fan in Canada, pretty sure you can find those a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah, they're a little bit more loud and proud about it, if you will.
That's a good way to put it.
All right, great. Thanks you so much for joining the program today. I'm gonna have to have you on again. I hope we can work something out in the future, not to give away too many plans.
You got to keep teasing them. That's the whole idea.
That's the idea. Hey, Greg, thanks again for joining the program today.
Thank you.
Before I move into my interview with Mr. Two Rivers, I'm going to play one more audio clip. Now, this is from the Montreal Gazette in July of 2015, and it goes into a little bit more detail regarding the Oka crisis and Mr. Two Rivers' involvement in it. So please enjoy this audio clip once again from the Montreal Gazette in July of 2015. And on the other side, I'm very honored to be bringing you my interview with Mr. Two Rivers himself.
It was totally unexpected on our part, but the Native community was aware of what could possibly happen, and they were prepared for it. So when it came down, they quickly informed the community of the crisis that Conshohocken was being attacked. We had support from Nova Scotia to the Rocky Mountains. We had people from Europe, Germany, Switzerland, all over the place supporting us. So we had international support. So it brought the issues to the surface, and we were right. Though we were condemned to be criminals and terrorists and whatnot, we were in our rightful position. There's a revival in our national pride. Maybe we took a lot of the punches and we rolled with it, but it revitalized and made the communities across the country again strong and believing in themselves. It brought the attention of our plight to a lot of people that didn't know what was happening. I speak of our own people and the oppressive way that governments were driving us toward assimilative policies, which is still going on today. So it was a reawakening, and the effects of it is still benefiting us. And we survived the 78 days, and we're looking forward to tomorrow. Hope we don't have to defend again.
Yeah, well, I led my life in blocks. Sort of a portion of it. I grew up in the community here till I was 16. Then from 16 to for 1940, 1950, 53. I wrestled for 24 years, And then I retired briefly and went into community politics. And then from community politics, I went to national politics. And then from national politics, well, this is basically, I was, 70, I guess, 70, 75 when I couldn't travel anymore. So now I'm doing all my politics through the phone and whatnot. So it's all in blocks,
Yes.
I come from, like my family is political. Well, they were all political in the community in one sense or other. But, I'm I guess a product of the elders that I grew up around with, the stories that they told, the personal stories from my parents and my grandparents and people around me. And we live in a tight community in Ganawage. I don't know if you've ever been here.
The furthest, the most in Quebec that I've traveled has been Quebec City and Montreal.
You went right by me.
Unintentionally, I might add.
We're only 15 minutes from Montreal. From the center, we're about 20 minutes, on a good day, 20 minutes, 25 minutes from the airport. So we're established in a very good section of the world. We live in a great area that we live in Ganawage, which we try to preserve for our own use and culture and our territorial integrity. But we're like say 10 minutes from Montreal, or 15 minutes, with a several million population. We're in a bilingual area for them over here, which we prefer English. So we don't speak that much French. And we have the open roads to New York City, to Boston, to Buffalo, to Detroit. That was for the iron workers, So our community was relatively healthy financially, and so our people are well traveled. And so I grew up in that environment. I grew up along the shores of the St. Lawrence River while we had the river before the Seaway, and grew up there with the youth, I guess, of my time. We all utilized the river for swimming, for fishing, winter ice skating, etc. Then so that was a normal life of growing up on an Indian community, picking up all the I guess the details of our history from our elders and our parents. And so I was not any different from anybody else. I played hockey in the winter and played lacrosse in the summer. That was our major sports, And so that was it. The community life was very countrified in terms of the way we used ourselves. We had large growth of forests that the communities all around us had depleted and cut all the trees off, and they had no farmland or what. I mean, they had farmland but no forest, And it's important for the forest to live, not so much so the farmland. The farmland is only a minor part of the forest growth or animals, human and otherwise. But you grow up with learning nature and all the other things. We logged wood in the fall for our stoves in the winter, and we had, I grew up when there was no plows on the street. There was sort of a made up plow by wood and drawn by horses. It was a great life. It's all gone now. It's not going to come back. And we have golf courses here. We've got 3 now, but at one time we had only 1. We had a golf club that was built here in 1930, not completed, but relatively usable in 1913. And that provided work for our community. And I guess the irregularity of the land as it was being dug up and dug here and there to build a railway track, the bedding for a railway track. The huge acreage that was left over made an excellent golf course with all the difficulties that they put into holes, So we had, like I said, when I grew up, we had 2 cows and 1 horse, and a number of chickens running around, and we raised 2 pigs a year, so killed them in the fall. My dad would kill them, and the women from the family would come over and dress the pigs, and it was something to see. It's all gone, and so I enjoyed that portion, and then I went to school and graduated up to 9th grade in the like the residential school system. Well, not residential, but home, so they went to school, but we were still under the teaching of the priests and the nuns. They tried to put our language down, and they taught us to sing hymns and whatnot, etc. So it was very interesting because it's something to learn, to know about. You don't go and have a discussion with somebody unless you've experienced it. So that was quite helpful. The teaching we got from the church and the school came in good use when we studied our political relationship with the government and its policies, etc., etc. And so when I reached, I played lacrosse, and I was about 13, 14 years old. And at that time, there was a community member who had trained for wrestling. And he was trained by his father. His father was John Joseph Bell, which he called himself War Eagle. And he had 1 son, and he was about 10 years older than me. So he was trained at his father, and he was wrestling in New York at the time when I guess it was Dumont TV in New York and Chicago, etc. And he was a big known name, Don Eagle. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
And he was not only active there, but also in Ohio as well, I believe, correct?
See, when he injured his back in Boston, he came back. He had a bad back, and he had to come back to Ganawaga for healing time, And so that's the year he came. He came in the springtime and recuperated, and in the summer we were an impoverished bunch of young guys who tried to get to different communities to play lacrosse, and we just try to get the truck money to lend us somebody to drive us. With sitting in the back of the truck going to Cornwall or other communities. the local French communities. We play lacrosse against them. And anyway, him and his dad, he had one of those 1951 Chrysler's fluid drive, 7-passenger.
Goodness.
We know there were seats folded in the front. Into the front seat. Yeah, well, he had that, and his father had another big car. So they volunteered. They got interested, and they volunteered to drive us to these places, these venues that we went to were fairly across. And I was approaching 6 feet and 180 pounds. When I was 15, So he was recovering there and taking us, and I guess he was impressed with the way I played lacrosse for some reason or other. He thought maybe I could wrestle, And he asked me. He says, "Billy, would you like to try to wrestling when I go back to wrestling? I can train with you." So I asked my parents, and my parents agreed, gave him guardianship, gave Don Eagle guardianship above myself. And there was 3 of us that he selected in the community, 2 other guys and myself. And we trained out in his local home where he lived, like along the riverside up on the west end of the community. And eventually the 2 other guys fell off the side of the road. I guess it wasn't their thing to do. So anyway, one February when we were at our local sort of hot dog and hamburger place with the jukebox, he walked in, and so we had a little chat, and he said, "Look, it's February now," he says, "and I'll be going back to Columbus, Ohio," he said, "to start training." And he said, "Are you still willing to try?" I said, "Okay." He said, "Well, go tell Mama that they were going to do this now." And so quite quickly, within a matter of 2 weeks, I was on my way to Columbus, Ohio, and he was ready to go back to training in Columbus, Ohio. So we spent time in the gymnasium and spent time at a Al Half's motel. The Al Half was the promoter in Columbus, Ohio at that time, and he put us up like his big star was back, so he put him up at the motel with me. So we lived there and get up at 5 in the morning and start running, and then have a nice breakfast and a little bit of rest. Then we went to the gymnasium in downtown Columbus. That was upstairs at a gymnasium run by Al Haft and trainers and guys coming back and forth, in and out, working out and whatnot. And we were brought into that environment. There are several of us, like a couple of young guys, maybe 8 of us, 7, 8 of us, and different parts of the world, the country. And so we inter-wrestled with each other, learned all the basic amateur moves and then professional moves, and we would get advice from people around us who would come in and put their elbows on the mat and give us advice. So, anyway, so that was the sort of the life that I started with in Columbus, Ohio. I made my acquaintances, friends, buddies, and began to meet some of the big name professional wrestlers at that time, Buddy Rogers and Don Leo Jonathan and fellas from New York City, basically. And I kept training well. Old Don quickly got back into shape. His back was good, and he started going his career back. And He was wrestling at around the Ohio area, and so and then he'd come in like in the morning, and then he'd go do his match, and then back again. And so he was toughening up, and I was getting beat up over in the gym. They always ask me, who's the best wrestler you met? I said, Don Eagle, my teacher. he beat up. He had his own punching bag, you know. And so it was pretty tough on me. You know, you get your aches and pains, and then you always have somebody telling. That's one of the best advice I ever got anyway from an old timer who had his cauliflower ears there, and his knobby shoulders and knobby knees, and putting his elbow on the mat. And he says afterwards, "Hey boys," he says, "come here." He says, "You're starting out." He says, "I'm an old man." He says, "I'm an old man in as far as wrestling goes." He might have been in 40s or just 40. And he said, "Listen," he says, "you're going to start wrestling." He says, "and if you get good and you earn money," he says, "put half away and spend the rest." I found that was a good advice. It wasn't always half, but always something went I put aside, you know, for a rainy day. So I thought that was a good advice that served me right up to today, you know. And so I begin now, Don, that wanted me now to start sort of traveling with him, helping him drive, you know, and just company in the trips that we made. We went all around Columbus. We went into Chicago. We went into Pennsylvania. We went into the lower Ohio River, you know, and Wheeling, West Virginia, and a couple other places, wrestling in there. And so I began to get a feel of what it was like, the traveling and the arenas and whatnot. And then one day he said, "Well," he says, "you know, it's time you got your nose in the ring." I said, "What?" I said, "It's time you went in." And so I got up all nervous and a naughty stomach, and he said, "We're going to what do you call it? Michigan, Detroit." We're going to Detroit, he says, and I got you a match there. He said, I'm on the card with me. He says, so we'll go up there, and he says that will be your first wrestling bout.
Pressure, hey?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. No fingernails left, you know. So I went to Detroit with him. Was saw a poster, and I was the opening bout, you know, 15 minutes, one fall, and then there was I think 3 other bouts on a card, and Don was the headliner. It was an arena, more like an arena gymnasium, where there was a big area on the bottom, and then on the top, I don't know if I've ever seen them, like a track.
Yep.
Track around the seating, you know, a running track on there. So so what happened is the place, Detroit, was occupied by a lot of our boys working over there, you know, and guys who were 2, 3, 4 years older than me were working on steel over there. Relatives of mine were there. So anyway, they got wind of this wrestling match that I was going to be on. And so I guess they were excited, and they wanted to go and watch it. So here I go. We had been practicing. Don and I had always been practicing to come to the ropes and then spring over the top rope because usually we had feathers on, and it was a bit awkward crawling between the ropes.
Get your gear caught.
So we jumped over them, you know. So here we go for my first bout. I come walking down the aisle, sort of no place to hide, and I went to got to the apron of the mat and took a deep breath and went to clear the ropes, and everything got over except my toe. I landed in a pile in the middle of the ring. Looked like some kind of chicken or something. You know? That's all the guys needed upstairs. They
Goodness.
speak the language, you know. And you wouldn't believe the things they were saying about me, you know. So a lot of it must have been hilarious, you know. But anyway, I got over that. I was able to jump over the ropes after that. But it was that time. And I think I wrestled to a draw or I lost. I don't know. I'll say I wrestled to a draw, but I think I lost. And so that was the start of my career. We started traveling together, and then eventually, after I did a lot of singles, they called me up to tag team partner with him. So it was like the two native people, the two Mohawks, and we traveled. Basically, our home base was Columbus. Then we moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and Florida, and up to Montreal for the summer. Well, not for the summer, but just for a swing by, for give us time to come home. But our main homestay, we found a home in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jim Crockett was the promoter at that time, and we traveled together, and then finally I had a 5-year contract with them because of the training I received from Don and his father, and after that I so more or less refused to sign the thing again because I thought that I was earning my own way, and I repaid them enough. Anyway, so then we went into tag matches as individuals, and finally, for some reason, we separated in Columbus, Ohio. No, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I got the opportunity to, I had friends there in Columbus, and one of them was a fellow from England, and he was wrestling in Charlotte, and then there was a couple of guys that I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, Red Bastine and Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens in particular, Red, trained somewhere else. But anyway, they were going to Calgary at the Stampede Wrestling. This was in 1958, I guess. 1958, yeah. Oh, before that, we were in. Don and I were in Florida, wrestling in Florida, and we got the opportunity to go to wrestle in Cuba. It was Castro's previous guy there.
Yeah, that's Cuba.
But yeah, they had the big casinos, and the mafia was sitting there. You know, all the mafia names at the big gambling in Cuba, and so we got over there, and we were booked for one match, and then we heard the rumors that there was this guy in the hills coming down into Havana, Fidel Castro. was coming close now. And so this was September, I guess, or October. And so Don did one bout in there, and then he asked me to stay because he was having another one, and why make me go back and forth. So I enjoyed a nice couple of days, well, weeks in Havana. All the meantime, the net was closing around Cuba, and the guys were riding around in jeeps with guns and uniform, and then everybody was scrambling to get out of there, and I got out of there too. So one trip, but the other trip came later too, where I was at another government upheaval. That was in Greece. In Greece, where they overthrew the government, and then we had to scramble out of there. So So I've been in two revolutions, and then then I got like I said, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my two buddies were going to into I don't remember the guy's name. He's a famous promoter there in is it Alberta? Yeah, Alberta. Yeah.
Hart for Stampede Wrestling.
Hart, yeah, Hart. That's the one, yeah. And anyway, and then this other fella from England said I'd been talking to the English promotions, and they'd be interested if you'd like to go to England. So I sort of tossed the idea back and forth of where I was going to go, and I just couldn't decide because they're very good friends. I'd never been out west, and I'd never been to England, so I flipped a coin, and England won.
Goodness, imagine flipping a coin.
So that's what happened. So that was it. And I told my buddies, I told Red Bastine, I said, look, when I finished in England, I said, I'll go right over and give you a phone call, and I'll go join you. They said, oh, okay. So that was our friendly party. And I made arrangements to go to England, and I went over there in September 59, I guess. Yeah, September 59. I went over there, and I wrestled for Joint Promotions, and at that time, so television had just begun in July, and the ITV over there. So they said I came in at the right time because right away I went on TV, and was very, very well accepted. And so instead of doing a 40 bout in one year and 40 bout in the other, usually people would leave in September, do their 40 boats, because they were that's all they were allowed by English wrestling law or some darn thing. You could come in for 40, and then you go the new year you do 40, so you get there for 80 matches. Well, we had a little discussion on how they came to my country, and I didn't order them around or anything like that. So they looked into it, and no, I didn't have to leave after 40 boats. Like, I said, I was a subject of the crown.
Oh yes, the workaround.
Yeah, so I stayed there for 6 years. But not 6 years in England, but most of the time in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. But I traveled to France, and I traveled to Amsterdam. I traveled down to North Africa, and mostly in England too. But like I said, I made short tours to these other areas, and I enjoyed it. to me, growing up, reading books over the castles and kings, and having imagination that a king was about 8 foot tall, big people, and father from the great white father, and all that, and then the castles and the knights in armor and all that. You're sort of awed by all that stuff that you read about, that you can actually see it. London and Trafalgar Square, and, Windsor Castle, and all the prison there where they kept people in Scotland, a beautiful country. I went up as far as Aberdeen, and I think one more place where they make the socks. Oh, Argyle. They did the little diamond socks that you used to have when you're too young.
Right. No, now they're back in fashion again.
And so I went there in Aberdeen, and down Dundee, and the big port out in the west. I don't know. I went all over Scotland, all over England. As a matter of fact, one guy said, "Yeah," he says, "you travel more in England than anybody else." Because of what they have sort of been particular to growing in their areas, their shires, or their little places that they stay in. They don't travel much. To travel from Manchester to Blackburn, the beach, it's a big trip. They get the car polished and the car washed and everything done, and they go. And it's about 35 miles. It's a big production. But anyway, the traveling I did was a great experience. I went to Northern Ireland, and like I say, went to Wales, all the wild country, if you want to call it, of Wales, and then along the coastline. Everything was interesting to me, and I've been there. I went there 6 years, and I haven't seen everything. So vast, London is so vast. It's all. I think it's made up of 50 little squares, and Westminster is where the central government is. But all the rest, all around, they're all London, and it takes you an hour or something to drive from anywhere to get into London. Traffic's always congested and slow and whatnot. So that was it. I spent time there. Then I came back home and went back to North Carolina, back and forth, and then I had got into politics and was doing that. I was elected on the council, and the first thing we got elected and had our meeting, the chief pointed the finger at me. He says, you travel. He says, because you know how to travel. You know how to go on a bus, you know how to go on a plane, and you know how to go to hotels, and so we're going to send you. You're going to be a man,
Yes.
So, well, I took to it. I was doing that all my life, practically.
Cool.
And then so I went back home, and after a while I was around there, and I went to Ottawa after that, after several years in council at home. I had 20 years in council at home. Then I went to work for the national office as an elder advisor, and in the meantime, I had kept up training before that. While I was home, I kept up training, and then all of a sudden, somebody knocks on my door, and it's Paul Vachon.
Wow.
Vachon comes and he says, "Hey, Billy, what you doing?" I said, "Oh, nothing much." I said, "Just traveling here and around. Would you, I had a couple of friends that were retired wrestlers too, and there was a community bar outside of Ottawa called the Plaza Hotel, and the guy was a former boxer, and they put up a ring there to attract boxers and wrestlers, and we trained there. So it was a nice life. And so Paul comes in, and I was in shape that time. Really, I weighed 232 pounds. I in the gym I tried to get lower. I tried to get to under 230. I couldn't do it. That beer after the workout. Anyway, so I got a call. So I got a call from Paul. He came in and we sat down, and he said we're starting out his organization as the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix. So there was him and Morris and Morris, his brother, and
Shows, I believe, right?
Yvonne Rivera Jr. and Edouard Carpentier. They were the four guys that got together and they started the promotion against promotion Johnny Rougeau. Johnny Rougeau was running a promotion, so they ran competition against him, and they wanted to know if I would wrestle for them, and Paul was like a little quiet and a little shy. He says, I know you had trouble with my brother, but that's all over with and whatnot. Because in 1955, Don got booked in Austin, Texas, and so just after Christmas, we left and we drove from home to Austin, Texas. And as soon as we got there, which was never my involvement, was speaking with the management and payoffs, and Don's father was going to the ring and taking his stuff, and he was getting preliminary pay, and so there was some back and forth on that, because the promotion didn't feel like they had to pay the chief,
Oh yeah.
Oh, we don't have to pay him. We're very due, but all the others accepted it where we traveled. But then, and Houston said no. And I guess Don said no either. So it was a big no on both sides. So we got there and we had our first bout, and we stayed there. We had our first boat, and my first boat was with a policeman, in what they call a policeman, a guy that takes care of of anybody that causes trouble or doesn't toe the line. And Maurice Vachon was the policeman. He was an international champion in Canada, I think, in 1948. The Olympics, the British wrestling. So he won that. So he was the policeman in Texas, and he was partnered with a guy from Boston, ex-cop. I can't remember his name, but they were a team, and so they booked me with Morris. And I didn't know what was going on. I don't know what the heck offices, this and that. I just got my bookings from Don, and I got paid, and that was it. So apparently they had a disagreement, and that we were supposed to leave after the week's bookings. Our last bookings would be then, and we were going to leave. They didn't get along. And so apparently the office gave orders to Morris to take the revenge out on me. So I didn't know what was going on, and I was only 20 years old or 21, somewhere there. Anyway, so they gave him orders to get back at them through me, you know. And so I started wrestling. All of a sudden, the old man, War Eagle, comes and he says in Indian, he says, come back at that guy. He says he's trying to hurt you. Because I found it odd too, you know. Okay, he was a old professional wrestler, Morris, and he was what they call trying to stretch me, you know. And so when I got the go ahead, she said, you know, take care of things for yourself. I'd never done this before, but I wasn't always that good a wrestler, but as a street fighter at home in Ganawag, if you didn't fight every day, something was wrong. Fighting over girls or all the things that we're growing, you know. Street fighting is not the same as the regulated form of wrestling, you know. So I just stood back, took a good aim, and got a hold of him. And he got a hold of me, and I set one on his jaw that knocked him out, right out. So then I knocked him out. He was just like a strike, and I was slamming him all over the place, and he'd go out on the floor all staggered, and I'd throw him back into the ring, and I beat him so bad, you know. I was their champion. They were policemen, you know. I stole his badge from him. So when this invitation from Paul came about, it came about cautiously, and so
Sure.
how's Morris? And he said, well, Morris wants you to come and wrestle for us. So that was it. I went over there, and I started wrestling with different partners, and finally they found a guy who was from Montreal, and he became my partner. Promoters create Indians more than the government of Canada does.
Yeah, they do.
They got the Indian Act, and they got the Promoters Act, you know. So they got me a partner, Johnny War Eagle is what he called himself. He was a nice French boy, and I got along with him. Had no trouble. He was glad to be with me, and he come at the house on the reserve and pick me up for trips. I didn't drive. Why not? You know, and so we became good friends, and I started wrestling. And then when we had the tag team, and I'd say without any overly patting myself on the back, that we had the best, the best combination of tag team partners with the right partners on the other side. The Blonde brothers, the Blonde, they had guys from Blonde, and they had their French name, I don't know, something in beauty or something. Anyway, so I wrestled with them till they ran out of all the business. They do what they do to everything. They imploded. They exploded inwardly. Just overspending and mismanagement, and for them all in pulling in different directions, and then Grand Prix collapsed. Went out of business. But they had big promotions. They had Andre the Giant was the first one because it was French, and Quebec was a French province, and it was his first stop into Montreal. And he was there. He created a sensation everywhere it went. But we were the first ones to have him over in Canada and the United States. And I guess I'm curious about different things. He was curious about Indian people, so he pretty well stuck to me. didn't speak good English, so I was his English teacher. I had a Ford, two-door Ford, so the passenger seat, the area was a lot of space, so he could sit in there, and his knees weren't in his chin, you know. So he made it. He sort of made it a sort of a requirement that we travel by car. He travels with me, you know. So we that was a great adventure with Jean Ferret, Andre the Giant, the same fella, and everything went well until these guys got greedy, you know. And it was too bad because they had a good thing going. They sold out the Forum all the time. They had outdoor arenas at the baseball field. 30,000 people in the old baseball field, and it was a good thing. They were going to the major cities, Quebec, you know, and Ottawa, and some of the out in the New Brunswick area promotion. We wrestled over there. So after that, I definitely, like I say, retired and got into politics, and then from politics, I'm here, and my knees started to go bad gradually, and so I had difficulty walking. Till finally they just gave out under me. I went arthritic and whatnot, and I couldn't walk, so I was in a wheelchair. And then it was very difficult for my wife to take care of me. She couldn't do it, and I said she couldn't. I didn't want her to do that. So I'm living here in a home care. On the community Catholic Memorial Hospital, and it's not a hospital; it's a clinic. What they call it, a hospital. They're happy with that, I guess, working at a hospital. But anyway, that was basically it. I'm here now. I've been here for 5 years. In the hospital, I've accumulated, acclimatized, or I got used to living here. In the summertime, when the weather is nice, I take my chair and I take a ride home. They gave me a chair with a little motor on the side.
Yeah.
Out to there, and then one of my grandsons or granddaughters come, and they walk with me, and I go back to the house, spend a couple hours there, then come back home. I mean, I call hospital home. So I get good care here. It could be better, but it's not bad. So that's basically where I am, where I was at, and I don't know if you have any questions, but that's a run through of what I went out of my life.
Your foray into politics, that was not originally your idea, was it?
Yeah, I was in politics. I was involved with the repatriation. You know, when they had the constitutional repatriation. Well, we had working with the Mohawks and the Ojibwe and a Western tribe there living on the island, Coast Salish. So we worked together as a group, and we all worked for the better interests of ourselves into Section 35 and developing that to the best of our ability. One of the highlights was when for me anyway, for a laugh, we were in the old train station in Ottawa, where the meetings were held. You know, across the street from the hotel. You know, are you familiar with Ottawa? There used to be a train station there.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think that's
there was a big area there that accumulated a large number of people, and they had the meetings there. So each sort of nation, tribal people were there from Canada, and looking at and trying to deal with the repatriation by Trudeau, for the Prime Minister Trudeau. And we'd go in every day. We started with an opening prayer and did the smudging. And so he sort of said, look, we're going to have to go through this every day. Doesn't one smudging, one opening prayer last for the entirety of the meeting? And so it was explained to him, no, we do that every day. Whether we're here or somewhere else, we do an opening, or we do in gatherings, we do an opening prayer, and this is our culture. And so he sort of mumbled under his breath, and he's Catholic, he's a Catholic person. And anyway, so he had a very sharp tongue, very, very sharp. So he would sort of go in and be very, very pointed and talk to these people, like belittling everybody on what was going on. He had an answer for everything. Right. In the meantime, over here in Quebec, we were deciding to go, getting the chiefs together and sending us as a delegation, like I think it was three Mohawks and a couple other advisors that were in there, and we were going, and Quebec was protesting that they were not going to this meeting. Rainy Levesque at that time said, "Oh, we're not going, or Quebec is not going to take part in this. They don't believe in repatriation or any other thing." Anyway, we decided to go, and all of a sudden in the press, the news breaks that Rainy Levesque is going to attend the meeting to ensure that the Native people in his community are taken care of and not misled. This is what he said. So anyway, in the meantime, now the Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy, which we belong to, I don't know if you're aware of the Six Nations.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they the Longhouse actually is what I'll call them, and they wanted to get their position put on the as one of the positions that were being given by different provinces and different things. So they came and they wanted to put this proposal on officially on the table. And so I was sitting in there, and what's his name? Wait, let me see. The Longhouse asked me if I would speak on their behalf, because it was not a Longhouse meeting and they wouldn't participate in it anyway, They wouldn't participate in it. So they asked me if I'd read their position to Canada and Trudeau, So so the day came, and so I was sitting next to what's his name, Trudeau, and then myself, and then Rainy Levesque was sitting on the other side. That's Quebec delegation, I think, about 3 delegations away. And then so we started the meeting, and then it was my turn to read this position of the Longhouse people. And so I began reading it, and all of a sudden I got an interruption from Trudeau. And Trudeau says, "Oh, Chief Two Rivers," he says, "by the way," he says, this presentation you make, is it for Quebec? So I chuckled immediately and I said,
Sir Elliot, yeah.
yeah, Pierre Elliott. No, I said, I said, Pierre Elliott, I said, you of all people should know that Quebec doesn't need anybody to speak on its own behalf. They can make their own presentation. From the crowd, because he'd been knifing everybody and slitting them and belittling everybody, and I gave him this response, and then Levesque was jumping up and down. I think he packs of cigarettes that day.
Oh goodness, I can't even imagine.
So that was I had a good several years I traveled around with the national chief as an advisor and a historian, because basically we have the first contact with Europeans for any level. We always had a distant relationship and not a respect for. They never had respect for us, but we forced them to acknowledge us anyway. And then so with that, like I enjoyed it. I traveled across the country and went to various meetings and had the meeting over here with the Quebec chiefs. I attended that on a regular basis. And so it's been a good memories for me. My most recent one is that I just helped in a film for APTN. There was a native group came over here and says, Billy says, we're trying to do a story from the native people's viewpoint. They said you get stories of the white man and it's the word history is his story, not ours. Yes. And they wanted to know about the fur trade and what I knew about it. Well, I'd been hearing about the fur trade all my life. I mean, any time there was a gathering of putting posts in, a fence post in or killing a pig or doing anything, the elders were there. And they sat all around on a log and smoked their pipe and told stories. And some of them dealt with the fur trade, how our boys went from here, rode across the river to Lachine, where the main office was in for the fur trade, and would go around and started collecting the pelts around here. And as the beaver pelt got depleted in the area, they moved further and further west. And they went from here, and they would go up the Ottawa River and out west, and they knew where to travel. They paddled their way. As the pelts got scarcer, they went further, till eventually they reached Alberta, and a place that is now Edmonton. There's a reserve that was taken over, but it was so our men left from here. As the journey got longer. It took 1 season to go there, spend the winter, and come back. And the company here entrusted our people to purchase pelts, and in exchange give them whatever they needed, pots and pans or whatever commodities that they could use that they didn't have. And so there was a good relationship from native people to native people. And I've heard stories of the European people putting a rifle there, and when the beaver pelts hit the top of the rifle, then they exchanged it. That's what they were given, rifle and powder. So anyway, they ended up in Edmonton, and it was in Edmonton then. I forget the name of the reserve. But anyway, At that time, the stay over there, they found it better to open a station there, a trading post in this reserve, and it was manned by one of the major men. Was a fellow called Gordillo and Araquande, and several other names of the fellows that stayed there. Young men, you know, only 22, 21. You had to be healthy to travel that far.
Really?
Yeah, so they set up this trading post to accept the furs from all around that area. So what happened was that they were doing well, and the different tribes would come and gather their beaver, and knowing that these boys from here would be arriving, they trade for whatever they had, and they already traded some furs in around Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, and they left that. And when they came home, they gathered these pelts that they already bought, and they had already given their gifts of trading material to the people there. And it was a good working relationship, and it was a good thing that was running good. And so in the meantime, now the French didn't like losing this market. And so what they proposed to do over here in Montreal, the governor has got to help with the economy. So the governor called this big meeting of 1701. 1701 was a big meeting of the chiefs and the French government. Well, the French government over here, and so they wanted to control, like everything else. They wanted to get a hold of everything and control it. And with that problem that they was to solve, they called a meeting, and there was only two people to the meeting. It was ourselves, our people who were traveling, then doing the fur trade, and it was them. The rest were all the observers that were coming to see who.
Oh, yeah.
Want to find out who they're doing the trade with. So they talked back and forth, and what the French were proposing was to be allowed to build a station similar to Edmonton in Detroit. You know, Detroit, the strait, it means the strait in French. And so Detroit, and they wanted to build another one in Kingston to get pelts coming from the lower part instead of the upper part of Canada. And so with the discussion that we had, our people said no. So they in order to compromise, there was no trading post in Detroit, but there was one in Kingston. But our trading post in Edmonton remained. And then that was a 1701 meeting where it's sort of told that the French were telling us what to do, you know, but no, they were coming and trying to get a deal and control it by establishing a similar system as ours for the receiving of pelts.
For benefit.
So I just finished a documentary on that. These people came in and filmed over here in the hospital room. I sat up and in my wheelchair and told the story to them. They filmed it every couple of days it took us, and they went back and they sort of got all the things together, developed it and edited it, and I guess whatnot. And they set it up with APTN, and APTN agreed to take the film. And well, then I guess that's their matter, how they settle that. But anyway, the film is going to be coming out probably with depending on the pandemic,
For sure.
July. And the thing I asked is, if you're going to have it, can you have a showing here in the community before the community, instead of before it goes on APTN as a history thing or whatever. So they agreed to that. They're working on it, and they're looking for a relationship with us. So one of the buildings that will accommodate a place where they can show the movie to the community. Well, not all the community, but it'll be available maybe 2 nights.
Give everyone a chance.
Yeah. So I'm all excited about seeing how it turned out, the story, and apparently they were quite happy with it. These people that came, and then the APTN was accepted it as part of history, So that's basically that's where I'm at. And then this guy Andy calls me up to an interview, Hey, I enjoyed this, Andy. It was just a nice recollection for myself. I don't always go back, I don't like to look back out of my shoulder. When I was leaving home when I was younger, it was just kiss my mother goodbye and turn around and walk out, Turn my back and walk away. And when you walk away, you learn to walk away from a lot of things. So I have to go back and dig back in my memory of how things were, and how different events happened, and enjoyed it. It was a review down memory lane. Say I do, I'll turn my back to you now and hang up the phone.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Ona.
Thank you very much.
As we head into the finish of tonight's program, I just want to play one more audio clip. Now, this one is just a funny clip that I found of Mr. Two Rivers telling a winemaking story from the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2001. Now, clearly, you just heard the interview with Mr. Two Rivers, so you get a pretty good glimpse of his humor and his zest for life. So I found this clip. I just think it's him in a nutshell, and I just think it's so funny. So I'm going to play this clip. If you have young children, there's no language to be worried about in this program, but you may have some explaining to do at the end of it. So I'm going to play this clip. I hope you all see the humor that he has, see the zest for life that he has in this program. And as well, we're going to get to wrapping this one up at the end of it all. So please enjoy this once again. Mr. Two Rivers from the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2001.
Tell us the story about your wine.
Yeah, okay. Rather quickly, this is the wine I make from wild grapes that grow on the reserve.
All right.
So I've made wine, and I learned it from my uncle. And I've given it to several people over the years, and they asked me, what's the name of the wine? And I said, it's called Panty Remover. So that became the name of this type of wine that I make, Panty Remover. Now what happens is we never believe that our children are listening to what we say. Well, at that time I had a 3-year-old daughter that happened to pick up this name I'd given my wine. Around New Year's, it's tradition for people to come and visit. Well, people came to visit me, and I was serving the wine. A nun who had now gone into normal clothing, her name was Sister Kay, came in with my sister-in-law. So I asked her, I said, will you have a highball? She said, no, thank you. Would you like a beer? The nun said, no, thank you. I said, you want a drink of wine? She said, no, thank you. I said, it should be all right. The priest drink it. Oh, she says, all right, I'll have a drink of wine. So I went back into the kitchen, prepared the other drinks, and in came this wine. As I was about to present it, my mother was there, and my wife was there, and everyone was there having his holiday drink. I was just about to serve Sister Kay the glass of wine. Out beside me comes running into the kitchen. Sister Kay, don't drink that, don't drink that. She said it's panty remover. My mother, my wife, things turned red, green, yellow, and it was hilarious. Yeah. Oh, it's so. Yeah. Sister Kay.
They hear, the children hear.
As we wrap up the program tonight, just once again, really am honored beyond words and truly blessed to have had Mr. Two Rivers on the program, and I want to send a special thank you out to him. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and patience and candor talking to me in regards to this program, and I really hope that everybody got out of it what I did, or at least a portion of it. I mean, you're hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will, so I really hope that you all enjoyed what he had to say on the program as much as I did. Also want to thank again Greg Oliver for joining the program. I will be having him on at a later date, not to give too much away, but I'm very looking forward to what we will be giving you guys in the future in terms of content and programming for Grappling with Canada. Now, I did mention at the start of the program that I'm going to start reading out 5-star reviews, because legitimately, if you guys are taking the time to leave me a review, I'm going to damn sure take the time to give you guys the respect and my admiration for you guys leaving those reviews. So we had a couple of 5-star reviews that were left regarding this program. EPW Show left a 5-star review saying pro wrestling is one of my favorite podcasts. I always love listening to anyone talking the graps. Great podcast. Thank you very much, EPW Show. We also had one left by Canadian Spirit, another 5-star review. He says, I'm going to start this off by saying I have about as much interest in sports as I do the geological formations of the rocks in my driveway. And yet, Andy somehow inexplicably held my undivided attention for 3 straight hours, telling the very human stories of Canada's most impressive athletes. Bravo, Taxman, bravo. No, bravo to you and the gentlemen at Canadian Spirit. They're a podcast that I follow, and they do very, very fun work in regards to the paranormal goings-on in Canada. So thank you guys very much for that review. We also had one left by Fireside Canada. He says, my knowledge of wrestling doesn't go much further than childhood favorites like Jake the Snake and Junkyard Dog. And he says in brackets, now you can guess my age. Nevertheless, I'm captivated by people talking about their passions, and, as I listened, I found myself sharing the excitement about an athlete I had never heard of. Next thing I knew, I'm watching a 50-year-old TV broadcast of Gene Kiniski battling Japan's Giant Baba, observing the otherwise reserved crowd throwing garbage into the ring, and marveling at Kiniski's talent for being a heel. Enthusiastic, educational, and slightly nostalgic. Give it a listen. Thank you very much, Fireside Canada, for that 5-star review. Once again, if you guys leave me a 5-star review on iTunes or Podchaser, or like I said, the aforementioned newly created Facebook group, I will make sure that I read them out on the show, because if you guys are going to take the effort to do that, then the least I can do is give the effort of reading them out on the show. So everybody, thanks again for your 5-star reviews. Once again, if you leave them, I'll read them, and you get some airtime, if you will, on Grappling with Canada. Just once again, want to mention, if you could go ahead and join those that Facebook group, Listen Me Talk. On Facebook, you can find us, just search Grappling with Canada. As well on Instagram, search Grappling with Canada. You can contact me on Twitter at 6_podcast, or use the search bar for Grappling with Canada. You can also email me, 6sidepod@gmail.com. There's no numbers, gimmicks, or anything in that. It's straight up letters, 6sidepod@gmail.com. Once again, just want to make mention, a little merchandise update. Things have been very busy around here with Manitoba going into further restrictions, so I'm going to have to push all of that back a little bit. I'm going to keep you guys in the loop. A few of you have emailed me in regards to securing your t-shirt size order. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, last month during the Gene Kiniski episode, I mentioned that we're going to be doing a limited run of 50 t-shirts, 50, of the classic Grappling with Canada podcast logo with the Canadian Maple Leaf flag. Once they're gone, they're gone. I'm taking not pre-orders, but if you want to make sure that you have a size that you want to make sure that you are secured in getting, you can email me 6sidepod at gmail.com. A few of you have done that already. So you got your foot in the door, if you will. So you can email me there, get in touch with me, and I will make sure for sure to order a specific size, or to make sure that I have one of a certain size set out for you specifically. So once again, I know I said it a bunch of times, but 6sidepod@gmail.com, and you can get your foot in the door, if you will. And once again, just want to mention patreon.com or patron.com /Grappling With Canada. $3 a month, support the show. The reality is, I'm one person. I don't have a production team. I don't have a social media team. I don't have anything except a wife, 2 kids, and 3 animals, and a full-time job. So it's not like this is some big conglomerate expedition, if you will. And you can clearly tell that by the way that I'm trying to enunciate this. So anyways, that would be the easiest way to support the show. Once again, $3 a month gets you the shows early, and as well gets you a shout out on these shows. Although I guess if you really wanted to shout it, you could leave a 5-star review and that would do it for you as well. So there are many ways to be interactive and get involved with the show. So once again, thank you everyone for checking out the show tonight. Like I said, go back in the archives if you haven't listened to our previous episodes covering Gene Kiniski, Dino Bravo, Gail Kim, or Stu Hart and Stampede Wrestling. They're really fantastic listens. And I look forward to seeing all of you next month as well for our next subject matter. But until then, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night, everyone.